colour balance there. Testing 1, 2.
So maybe if we start with, what are the most important components of a camera setup?
I mean, the biggest thing really is light.
When it comes to dental photography, we want to take photos of teeth. We want to take photos of the face and the smile, the teeth in that face.
There's not a lot of creativity in there, is there? Stuff by book, film, and develop them all in my mother's loft.
Yeah, so you're using foreign language here.
Yeah. So okay.
Developing films.
Yeah. So.
Hello everyone, welcome. Today is really exciting. We have with us, as always, Dr. Arnold over there. And we're very, very delighted to have Neil with us here today. So we're gonna get straight into it. So Arnold, if you take it away.
Yeah, so today we really want to look into cameras. Cameras is like a mystery box in dentistry. So we just want to get some more clarity on, what cameras should we be using, how should we be using them, all of that. We want to try and just get some clarity, and we've got the expert Neil with us. So maybe Neil, if you give us a little background as to your experience with cameras, how you got into loving cameras.
Sure, loving cameras. I've loved cameras since I was a kid. I think my first camera was a Polaroid camera, way back. But I grew up wanting to do photography. I used to develop my own black and white stuff, buy book, film, and develop them all in my mother's loft.
Yeah, so you're using foreign language here.
Yeah. So okay.
Developing films.
Yeah. So you did that. So yeah. As you can probably tell from some of this grey hair, I have been around a while, and film. This is where I started. Then. Huge leap forward, and I used to work for Lancashire Life and Cheshire Life magazines a lot, and other county magazines, doing all sorts of photography. So that'd be house interiors, it would be interviews with celebrities, it would be events, all kinds of things like that. I covered on photography. To where I am today, which is basically I've moved into video as well. Video, and obviously everything's digital now, so there's digital manipulation of images, there's Photoshop, and then there's with video there's all the editing and color corrections and and the audio, etc. to go with it. So quite a lot of different things.
Yeah. So I know back in the day you'd have to. So I remember the days of was it Kodak, where you had to get the shot right within your 30 or so shots. The small cameras where you'd go to the store and then they'd get developed.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're working on print films to produce photographs, you had quite a lot of latitude, which means it could be underexposed or overexposed quite a bit without it affecting it. Where I used to work was on what they call transparency film, which is slides, if you remember those things. These little white things with a little picture in the middle. And on those, you had to be within half an increment of light stop to get it right, and if you got it wrong, you forget it. So you used to actually take sort of 5 photographs for every one. So if you take a landscape, you'd underexpose and overexpose to get one of them would be right.
Yeah.
So I realise it's ancient history for some people. This now, isn't it? I forget. I'm still living it. You know what I mean?
But do you not think it's gotten more complicated? Because back in the day, a camera had one button. Now it's got loads of different buttons. And
I think, like most things in life, some things are more complicated, some things are simpler. I mean, the camera, if you want it to, will do a lot for you. And heck, you can just put it in P, which is program mode. Some people think it's professional, but no, it's program mode. It means it does everything for you. So you can make it as complicated or as easy as you want. Again, back in the day, using film, etc., lots of people would just literally press the button. But if you were doing it professionally, there was a lot of control there. And I think that the knowledge that I gained from that time and the mistakes that I made really does hone up your skills. Now you can take a digital camera, you can take a picture, you can look at it straight away and see what's wrong with it, analyse it. And when I was a kid doing photography, you'd have to develop a film or take it to the chemist and get it back and look at it and think, yeah, I realised I did that 36 times and it was all completely wrong. And so the learning curve was more painful, but it made you work harder on it. So.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like to keep things very simple. So, you know, when it comes to dental photography, you know, we want to take photos of teeth. We want to take photos of the face and the smile, the teeth in that face.
There's not a lot of creativity in there, is there?
Yeah. And maybe if we get a bit outside thinking outside the box, we want to take a little video of a patient giving a bit of a testimonial. So I want to try and just see if we can get some clarity in how us as dentists can do that in a better, more efficient way. So maybe if we start with, you know, what are the most important components of a camera setup? Because people say that the body is not as important as the lens should be more expensive than the body. What type of lens should you get? You know, the one I've got, you know, you can zoom in and out. Some people say you should just get one that's already at one sort of zoom. I don't know. So yeah, can you just tell us a little bit about what the most important parts to a camera are?
I mean, the biggest thing really is light. So obviously photography, the name comes from light. So that has a huge impact on what you do. There is, like most things, it's a law of diminishing returns. You know, a cheaper camera, if you double the price, quite often you don't get double the quality. You know, and so you get these days with digital, you can get a pretty good camera for, you know, not too much money. You can spend a lot more and it will be better, but it won't be like twice as good for twice the price. So yeah, in dental photography, you're looking particularly at closeness. You know, being able to photograph something very, very closely with detail needs a thing called a macro lens, or a lens that's got a macro capability. That means the ability to focus very, very closely. So that's the first thing you want to think about, is the lens.
Just picking you up on that, is that why you can't get as good an image on your smartphone if you were to try and take a photo of teeth as opposed to DSLR? Or is it just part of the story? Is it to do with the lens?
I am. It's to do with the lens and the way that it integrates with the camera. I am very often surprised. I've just got, not too long ago, got an iPhone 13, and as a photographer, I'm blown away with what it can do. You know, and it has got quite a good close-up capability. It really depends on the type of shot that you want. The biggest thing about it is not only the ability to focus closely, but this thing called depth of field. Now, the depth of field, without getting too technical, is basically what is in focus. Okay, so what's in focus, as you get closer to your subject, and if I'm coming into your mouth, you know, with the camera, and I'm getting closer to your teeth, that depth of field decreases as we get in. So the focal, if I focus on this cup here, I can get the front lip of the cup in focus and the back lip of at that distance. If I'm then going to bring that in close and look at it from, you know, 6 inches away or 15 centimeters, then I can get the front in focus, but I can't get the back in focus. That depth of field has narrowed. The way to compensate for that is that the lenses have one of the settings on is what you call the f-stop, which controls how much light's coming into the camera. And basically, the lower the f-stop, which is the higher the number. So most lenses are something from something like f2.8, which means the lens is wide open, allowing the maximum light in. That means that the depth of field is very shallow.
Right, let me stop you there.
Everyone's lost that.
In dentistry, if I say f11, f22,
Yes.
f36 or f32,
Yes.
it's almost like a cheat code. If I want to do teeth, I do f32 or f36.
Yeah.
If I want to do a full profile shot, I go to f11.
That's it.
So we do that as a cheat sheet, but you're explaining why that's
I'm
the case.
giving you the technical reasons behind it. What you could close the lens down, go to f11, f16. All the time your depth of field is increasing. Now, if you were shooting a landscape, that would mean that you know, that bush in the front and the foreground of the picture would be in focus, and the mountains in the distance would all be in focus, getting a massive depth of field. But as we move in closer with our macro lens on the front of our camera, and we're getting closer and closer and closer to the subject, that depth of field is getting narrower. So by going to f16 or f32, as you said, you're getting the maximum depth of field. The downside of that is that to make that work, you need more light. Because you're closing the lens down, the iris, it's like the iris in your eye. You know, when you go outside and the sun shines brightly and your eyes close down. And when you're out at night in the dark, your irises open up to let more light in. The camera works in exactly the same way. So if you are closing that lens down to f36, you're going to need a lot more light. And that's why having something like these flashes where you can pump out more light to reach the subject is what you need. Yeah, or some kind of bright light.
So if all I have is a phone, what can I do with that phone? You know, how can I enhance what I can get out of it?
Basically, if that's what you've got and you're stuck with that, is first thing you've got is the screen to look at what you're getting, because you've got feedback straight away. You can see what you're getting. To get the maximum light out, take somebody to the light source. If the light's above us like it is here, get them to lean back and open the mouth and get as much light shining in there as possible. Take them to a window. You could even use a torch or something like that, you know, a fixed light of some kind. If you've got a flash, the other thing I want to say about if you're using flash, and the reason why this camera has got two flashes on the front is to give an even light. As you're moving in closer, you can have one part of the image which has got loads and loads of light and burnt out because there's too much light hitting it, and the other part is in dark shadow. So that's why you've got these two lights on the front there. But I mean, again, it's surprising how good what you can get very, very close up. I'm continually surprised by my phone what it can do. But look at what you're getting, and if it doesn't work, you know, move the subject around to a different position, try and get them by a window, get some light shining in there.
Brilliant. Yeah. So you mentioned f-stop there, you mentioned the lens, you started to talk about light. So one thing that I've heard a lot about, which I probably need to improve on, is with my current setup with the twin flash, they say that it gives a harsh light onto the teeth. And then I see other dentists who start to use diffusers to soften up the image, and it just gives a nicer result to it. So maybe if you just talk about the light, you started to touch on the importance of the light, but how can we start to get an even better image?
So now we're going, not just looking at like the strength of the light in relation to the aperture of the lens and how much light is getting into the camera, you talk about the quality of light. So the general rule for quality of light is that things look better under a softer light and a more even light. And I mean, again, looking at your setup with this camera here, you've got two plastic diffusers on there, which will soften it. If you were to take those off and just use the flash straight on, that would be a much harsher light. So those help. Another step beyond this would be a ring flash, which basically puts the flash right around the lens, and that gives a nice even distribution of light. After that, you're probably looking at some kind of light source with a diffuser fitted to it. When we're talking photography about diffusion and what have you, one of the easiest ways to get a diffuse light is to have a window and to hang something like a piece of muslin in front of it, or a piece of white cloth, or something like shower curtain is the classic, the white plastic shower curtain. A piece of that in front of a window gives a very soft light because the light is diffused and it's falling evenly over the surface. A flashlight without a diffuser on is very harsh light and not very
What I've seen is people putting like, it almost looks like paper or sheets that come across the light.
Yeah, like a little dome. Yeah, again, same thing. The more that light is spread out and diffused and softened by travelling through something like that, the nicer the image is going to be. The converse side of that is you just lose some light as well by doing that, so you're not getting the same brightness. Fortunately, with cameras like this and with like your setup there, you've got a controller, and what it's doing is it's actually, as you're making the exposure, it's measuring the amount of light that's falling on the subject, and it's working it out and basically turning the flash off, thousandths of a second, but turning the flash off when it's got enough light to expose the image. It's like a fully automated system. You know, again, back in the day, we used to use light meters and things like that to measure the light and set up the camera accordingly. So things have got a lot easier in that way.
So one of the things I can struggle with sometimes is getting reproducible shots. So I see a patient today, take a photo or a series of photos, I see them in 6 months' time, and take that same series of photos, but it's not identical in terms of the reproducibility of those photos. I've got a feeling that part of it is down to the fact that my lens, I can zoom in and out, and if you've got like a set zoom, I guess that eliminates a layer of complexity in trying to reproduce the shot. Maybe can you talk to us about where I might be finding how to simplify that?
I mean, there are several settings on the camera that could be different. Your white balance could be different. Light comes in different colours. Okay, so normal daylight outside is a relatively blue light. The old incandescent lights indoors, tungsten lighting as it used to be called, has a yellowy glow. I mean, these are measured in they're measured in what you call degrees Kelvin, depending on the colour temperature. So that's one variation. You know, if you're photographing somebody's teeth and it's a very sunlit day and you've got a lot of sunlight coming in through the window, and it's a nice sunny day, the colour temperature will be one thing. If you then do it on a dull day, it'll be different. If you've got the lights on inside one day and you've not got them in on the next day, that colour temperature is going to change and things like that. And as you say, by standardising as much as you can. So if you always take them in the same place with the curtain, if you was using flash, you could shut the light out, so you've got complete control. Everything, all the light is coming from your flash. Then you could just use the same setting on your flash each time to give you more similar results. Yeah.
So one thing I've started to do is it's got numbers on it. I think this is in millimeters. So for example, if I'm doing a profile shot, I'll put it on 50. And if I'm now doing inside the mouth, I'll put it on 85. I just do that as a way of standardizing.
Yeah, that's good.
My shots. Would it be simpler for me just to remove this varied zooming in, zooming out, and have just a set lens? What benefit do I get from having just a set? When you change your zoom, I mean, what you're talking about here for the listeners is different focal lengths of lenses. Okay, so generally speaking, the higher the number, the more magnification that the lens gets. Now this lens that you've got on here is an 18 to 135. So 135 conventional is what a longer focal length. There's more magnification, so it makes it a narrower view, but a closer, more magnified view. If you go up to the maximum, which is 18, it's quite a wide view. The camera that we're filming this on for the podcast is set, I think, set to a 16mm lens, so it's quite a wide lens. It fits the whole room in. Conventionally, if you're doing portraits and things like that, you want to be somewhere between 50 and 85. Because the other thing that happens is, as you're changing that focal length, is it distorts.
With a very, very wide angle lens, if you get very, very close, you get a very distorted. I mean, again, if anybody's watching this podcast, you'll see that you guys, Chico at the edge there is slightly stretched, and you're slightly stretched, and I should be quite straight because I'm sat in the middle. So there's less distortion on me.
I have more pounds on me.
Yeah.
So it's not me really.
So that's one factor. The focal length of the lens. When you said you put it onto 85 when you're doing close-ups of the teeth, what you will have found is that at that distance you've got a comfortable working relationship from yourself to the patient. So you're not literally in the mouth. You're at a safe distance, as it were. And you find that you can frame it and fit everything that you need to fit in within that.
I've got, and on that, slightly going away but coming back, and this question might even go to Arnold and then bounce back to Neil, which is, I was thinking about, obviously there's things that you can do while you're taking the pictures and everything. How about editing? So obviously I know there's the ethics of it as well, where you don't want to edit too much that, the teeth look completely different to what you've actually done. Like, what's your take on it, Arnold? Like, from what you've done, have you done a lot of editing to pictures before and also then it might bounce back to Neil in, what can you do and to edit without changing what you actually feel?
So like what you said, you don't want to be doing false advertising. So really when I say editing, I mean cropping, cutting out like fingers with glove fingers, maybe rotating the image because I'm taking photos of the mirror, showing the teeth. So that's the editing I'm doing, rotating images, cropping them. But I'm not changing contrast or anything like that.
You're not photoshopping out people's fillings and things like that.
Yeah, I'm not doing any of that.
And that's but is there a way, I don't know, maybe this might be a new, is there a way to edit without changing the colors and the reality of the picture?
What you could do, without getting too technical, is make sure that your white balance is correct. Okay. And the way to do that is to use a card. I mean, one with me here. Oh, you have actually. Is to use one of these color calibrators. You can just use a piece of white paper, or you can use a piece of grey card. So that strip of grey on this is set to what you call 60% grey, and really, if you photograph that, if you're photographing a series of shots and the lighting is the same, you just take one extra shot with that in the shot. Then within Photoshop, you can calibrate your white balance using that grey. And then you can apply the same setting to all the subsequent shots. I mean, it's a completely different thing, but I used to do fashion photography. I used to do a lot of photography for a wedding magazine. And at the time when I was working with my wife, what we used to do was we used to have a grey card, which is just a card with that same grey colour on there, and we would take a shot with that at the beginning, do that particular garb, that dress, and then do the same at the end. And then when I come to do it in Photoshop, I can just click on that, get the white balance right, because we'd be working in all sorts of different lighting. You'd have fluorescent in one room, you'd have natural daylight, you'd be working outside, the sun would change, all the colour temperature changes. So that's one way of that I would be doing anyway. Plus also, I would imagine that it'd be quite important, the colour, because people's teeth are vastly different colours, aren't they? So you really don't want to misrepresent what you're taking by, making something like fantastic white teeth, and they go outside and they're not that white after all, which is something you could do in Photoshop. So by having some kind of calibration with a grey card or something like that in the shot, you're going to get, even if the light is changing, you're going to get a consistency.
Okay. Just want to think, is there anything else that we've missed out in terms of the parts, components of the camera which are important? I know we've covered lighting, we've covered lenses, twin flashes, focal lengths. Is there anything else that you would say is important to? There's something I would say which isn't as important as people would think, which is basically how many megapixels the camera's got.
There's a huge fixation with getting as many megapixels as possible on cameras, and it's not really that valid. Once you reach somewhere around 12, 16, 20, depending on what you're going to do. I mean, I can't see you wanting to blow up a picture big enough to put on the side of a truck or something like that. So, you know, they're more than adequate, and the difference between a 12 megapixel camera and a 48 megapixel camera, if you were, you know, let's say blowing pictures up the size of a wall, you might see a difference, but really, so I wouldn't get carried away with pixels and how many megapixels a camera's got. That's something I've mentioned.
What would you say even if someone said, you know, I don't know much about cameras. You've got 1 minute to speak to them before they go buy their camera. You know, what would you say to them about what to consider? So a dentist, and they're going to be taking pictures of teeth.
To be honest, I'd say go and ask another dentist. If you've got somebody who's got something that's working, as Dr. Arnold does here, he's got this camera, and what is it? It's a Canon, I know that. It's a 90D, and I've seen some of your pictures, and they look great. Then really, I would, you know, probably copy you, because I know that it's a formula that's working. And yeah, what we're talking about is quite a specialist usage, you know, and you're after a particular result, and it's I mean, apart from photographing flowers and insects, which is another macro function. You've got the kit for it. I mean, you could get some beautiful butterfly pictures with spider. The only other thing I would say is I would always buy what you call a UV filter or skylight filter to go on the front. Every lens that I've got one of those filters on. It's a clear filter. It doesn't really do very much at all, but it stops those finger marks. And I can see that yours have got a few finger marks. and so, you know, because yeah, I would imagine when you're working up close to people's mouths, you know, and so because anything that goes on the front lens degrades the picture a tiny bit.
So one thing that I do when I'm taking photos is I put it on manual mode, and then put my settings that I've now come to like. What do you think about just using automatic mode for photos, and yeah, even for the flash, just putting everything on automatic?
You may get a good result. Next time you might not get as good a result. You're introducing an inconsistency. The camera is going to compensate for the lighting, for the colour temperature, and for the distance, etc., that you're away from it. So by going into manual, you're taking more control. And when we spoke about earlier, about, you know, getting this consistency, then you're losing that, because the camera, you know, you think what you're doing one thing, but the camera's actually compensating for it. I would imagine, even though you're using manual, there'll be some element of the flash system will be controlling how much flash it's pumping out onto the subject matter. So, I mean, I don't know if that's right, but I would imagine so. Other than that, you're in the situation of measuring the distance and dialing it in to get it to get that consistent lighting.
How about manual focus versus autofocus?
Focus is critical. As I said earlier, the depth of field, that is the point that's in focus at the front of the image and the point that's in focus at the back of the image, as you get closer, goes narrower and narrower and narrower. I think in this particular subject matter, autofocus could be quite good. If you were to use manual, you could then actually compensate by literally moving in and out closer and further away until you can see the focus. It depends on people's eyesight. You know, if you've got a really good, keen eyesight, then you can see that. Some people, older people, shall we say, you know, I'm maybe like myself, you know, autofocus is great, but again, what has the autofocus decided that it wants in focus? Yeah. It might not be what you want in focus. You're looking for a particular tooth or a particular point on a tooth that you want pin sharp. the camera might have other ideas. It might be looking at the tonsils at the back, and all your nice pearly whites are all fuzzy blobs in the front. So
yeah, I found my own little particular quirk with the camera where I put it on autofocus just to get the general area, switch it to manual focus, and then when I'm going back and forth, like a square comes up that tells me I'm on manual focus, but it almost tells me that's the distance to be in, and then I take my photo, and then I just take my other photos from that same manual focus point.
One thing that you can use, which I use on video cameras, is a thing called focus peaking. It's like a manual assist, and what it does is it shows you what is in focus by representing it with a colour. You can preset it. Mine on this camera here in front was set to red, so that basically anything that is in focus has got a red outline around it, and particularly it's looking for contrast. So if you've got so for example in portrait photography, it's always the eye that's going to be in focus, or at least if a person's looking square at you, it's the eye. If a person's looking from one direction, it's the front eye, and that's really what you always want in focus. With a very narrow depth of field, the tip of the nose might be blurred, their ear might be blurred, and beyond it all blurred, but it's that eye that you want pen sharp. Now, with your eyes, you've usually got your white of your eye and the iris of your eye. You've got that contrast there. So what you can do with focus peaking, put it in manual, and adjust the focus so that you can see this red ring, and then you've got it bang on, and you know that you've got control, and it's going to be right. With autofocus, there is always an element of chance, and the camera might misinterpret what you want in focus.
Yeah, I'll have to have a look at that setting for focus peaking.
Focus peaking, yeah. I mean, on the Panasonic Lumix I'm using here, that's what they call it. They'll call it different things. Sometimes they call it focus assist. Okay. And that is a really, really useful thing.
Okay. So maybe video?
Yeah, absolutely. So because obviously as a dentist, you may want to do videos of your patients. You may want to do a TikTok or whatever else you want to do with video. So what would you advise? Would you advise using the same camera that is used for pictures to use for video as well, or what would you change there?
I think you've got to think about what you want to do with it and what kind of results you want. You can go extremely expensive at one end, but we'll need a lot of knowledge to get the most out of that. The other end is your iPhone again. You can achieve quite a lot without having to go into lots of expense and lots of technical knowledge to make it all work. Basic rules, I would say that shoot in as high a resolution as you can. The other thing about video is it's not so much what you're shooting, it's what you're going to do with it afterwards. Are you going to be able to edit it? What equipment have you got to edit it on? If you're shooting something in 4K, then it's the computer that you're using is going to need to have more resources in it, more memory capacity, etc., to be able to edit with that. So that's another factor with video. It's always more complicated. And the biggest thing about video, which people don't generally get, unless you're going to put a music track over the top of it or something like that, is that sound quality is more important than the picture quality. It depends on what you're shooting and what you want to do with it. If you're doing something technical, like videoing somebody's teeth, then obviously the image is more important. But if you're wanting to use it for social media, things like that, then really you need to have ideally a particular microphone. We're using these radio lavalier microphones at the moment. You're getting quite good sound, but the microphone on the camera is usually relatively poor quality. It's not close enough. Our microphones here are quite close to us, so that makes a really big difference. The difference between 6 inches foot and 3 feet, where you'd normally be with a video camera, or 4 or 5 feet, the quality of the sound drops off as well. So that's a good point. But again, for a small outlay, you can make a massive difference. With my iPhone, I use one of these little lavalier microphones with an adapter that plugs into my iPhone, I can hold my iPhone there, I can talk to it, and if I want, I can use a teleprompter software on there, so I can read what I want to say to people. And the quality is as good as studio quality for the price of 30 or 40 quid lav mic.